Oh no! This means Blackbeard's crew is going to show up and take the Paw Fruit. You know, that's disturbingly possible. Even though all of Blackbeard's crew seem to have been fully fruited up, they're still hunting for magical fruit. I mean, Blackbeard jumped at the opportunity to get Ball Hancock's power, so I wonder if Blackbeard has a, how shall we say, dirtier way of doing what Vegapunk does with the Seraphim, by which I mean he can move devil fruit powers in and out of them through the green blood system, and with that, any Seraph can have any recorded fruit. Well, you know what, if Vegapunk felt like it, he could probably give all of the Seraphim the same fruit power at the same time. But because Blackbeard can cancel out fruit powers, and he himself can hold multiple abilities at the same time, then he might have a way of maneuvering abilities in and out of his crew members as well, which would make him a strategic nightmare to deal with. For whatever situation, he can just load out his crew with the perfect combination of abilities to deal with it. And if any one of them were to attain the Paw Fruit, then they would become almost impossible, if not outright impossible to defeat. To the best of my knowledge, Bartholomew Kuma has never lost a fight. And now that Kizaru has been fought to a draw by Luffy, Kuma might actually have the highest win rate of any top tier One Piece character. So it's a disturbing possibility for sure. I mean, there's no way that the Blackbeard Pirates went to Egghead Island with that specific intention they could not have known. So they're definitely there lurking for other mysterious reasons. But you'd have to imagine at this point, right, that everywhere they go, they're carrying a sack of every known fruit in the world, just in case they stumble upon something interesting. Although their strategy could be even more sinister than that. They might not actually have the intention of setting foot on Egghead Island. They may have just heard of the upcoming conflict and decided to camp the island, waiting for some big hotshot devil fruit users to rock up, do a bit of a fight battle and die, and then have their abilities reincarnate aboard their ship. That's not the only possibility though, and some of you may have heard this before, because this is one of the oldest theories I can remember seeing about One Piece, which is that each devil fruit used by a Straw Hat crew member forms part of a number sequence. Luffy's devil fruit, Gomu, as we all know, can be read as 5 and 6 in Japanese, but Chopper's Hito can be read as 1 and 10, Robin's Hana as 8 and 7, and Brook's Yomi is 4 and 3. It's a genuinely fascinating, what I'm going to call coincidence, because I don't quite buy this myself, but for the longest time, this has been used to try and predict the next Straw Hat crew member. The idea that it's going to be someone with a devil fruit, and that fruit fills in the 2 missing numbers of the system, which are 2 and 9, which just so happens to perfectly fit one Bartholomew Kuma, who has the Nikyu no Mi, with the word Nikyu being able to be read as 2 and 9, Nikyu. So for as long as Brook has been a Straw Hat, people have been offering this up as a potential solution based on number theory alone. No evidence, no real evidence, just the number thing. But the reason why I bring that up is because when Kuma does die, that fruit, well, it's got to go somewhere, and the Thousand Sunny just so happens to have a tangerine plantation. So it's very possible that the fruit could reincarnate aboard the ship. As for where it would go from there, I don't know. Bonney can't inherit it, she already has powers. And a lot of people seem to think it would be a good idea to give it to Frankie, but Frankie himself would disagree with that. Frankie was already offered Ace's devil fruit on Dressrosa, and he declined it because he'd rather be able to swim. Will Saturn's own self-destruct feature he had put in Kuma be his own downfall? Find out on the next episode of Fictional Pirates. I'm not opposed to this idea at all, and for the last few months there's been a lot of conversations online about the possibility of Kuma killing Saint Saturn. The general idea being that he's going to compress all of the pain that he's taken over the last couple of years and use it to shove it right in Saint Saturn's face and the rest of his body and destroy him. But I think those ideas are more bloodthirsty projections of the fanbase wanting Saturn to suffer, and that's fair, but I just don't see that being the Kuma thing to do. However, what I can 100% see happening is Saturn dooming himself by activating the self-destruct mechanism and getting caught up in the explosion due to a series of fatesome events. It's very appropriate because Kuma is not the one killing Saturn. Saturn here would be being brought down by his own hubris. But regardless of that, it would lead to all of the blame being put on Luffy. The Egghead Island incident, which may involve the death of an Elder Star and the destruction of the island and the kidnapping of Vegapunk, would be attributed to Luffy and potentially make him an even more wanted criminal than Dragon. And what I also like about that is that it may, for the first time in centuries, make the world government truly vulnerable. Right now, they've got a pretty sweet system of governance set up with each of the 5 guy people acting as supreme overlords of integral aspects of life. But if one just just one old man goes down, then they lose 20% of their ruling capacity, which in Saturn's case may be more important than the others because he is the warrior god of science and defense. And if you lose the guy in charge of defense, then you're gonna have a much harder time doing all of the defensing. The saddest part is that since Bonney absorbed and touched the memory bubble, Kuma can't reabsorb it anymore, so he's 100% dead for sure. It's simply tragic. And I feel like I've used this word a lot during this arc, but the term that comes to mind, it keeps coming to mind, is Shakespearean. Bonney, with her abrasive desire for answers, ignored the pleas of Vegapunk, and may very well have removed her father's last chance at restoration as a result. Depending on how you view the philosophy behind what constitutes life, which in Vegapunk's case his theory has to do with memories, you could argue that Bonney was the one who delivered the final act of erasing Kuma. Because in this chapter, yes, it does allude to an idea that Vegapunk invented a system that could switch between consciousness and cyborgliness. But now, even in the best case scenario where Kuma doesn't blow up, we're still left with a blank slate. He might not be a mindless slave anymore, but without his memories, Kuma would essentially be a giant newborn, which is a thing that he was when he was born anyway, but this time much bigger. And I don't know if there's any happy ending potential there. Kuma gets his freedom back and maybe Bonney goes all cyclical and decides to raise her father, but I don't know. I still feel like the big boom option is what we're working towards here. Bonney is now another who knows nothing happened. That is correct. Bonney actually got to see the nothing happened moment on Thriller Bark and knows a bit more about Zoro than any of the Straw Hats do. So there's 3 people in the world that know: Zoro, Bonney, and Vegapunk. And also, it's pretty much confirmed now, Bonney should know that Luffy is Nika. And she might even know quite a bit about Nika because she would have seen the stories that Kuma was told by his father. So there's potential for a Bonney lore drop in the future. I've got a question for you. Aren't the Vegapunk satellites able to share information with him? And if they can, shouldn't York know about Luffy being Dragon's son? Yeah, so this whole question about information sharing is quite vague. Theoretically, all of the Vegapunks have the same information because they sync up regularly with Punk records, but we also know through York actually that it's possible to withhold information from Stella as well as the other satellites. So I figure that it would work the same the other way around. With particularly sensitive information, Stella may have chosen not to place it into Punk records and just confide in Shaka. Although I have to say, for the specific question about Dragon, it probably doesn't matter, because the whole world has known that Luffy is Dragon's son for about 2 years now, ever since Sengoku announced it at the Paramount War. Another character that died smiling. Yeah, that's true actually. Another character without the will of D as well, who died with a smile like Kozuki Oden. And something I didn't mention in the chapter review was the immediate next shot of Kuma. The last shot we saw of conscious Kuma was a smiling, happy bear man, and the next time we see him is a sad, soulless cyborg. Like, the world government robbed this man of far more than just his memories and his life. They robbed Kuma of his relentless and unbreakable joy, the ability to smile and carry on no matter what the world throws at you. And that moment right there is probably a great summary of what the world government has done to the planet in general. So here's the planet, right? I'm the world government, the planet, happy joy. But me, world government, I don't like that. I don't like any of this. So what we need to do is choke and suck all of the joy out of this until nothing remains. I think all of us cried with this chapter. So at this point, I've gone back and reread the chapter a few times, and mate, that last panel never gets easier. Nor does the whole page of Kuma running. And this is the sort of scene that is such a gift to the anime. These are the kind of moments where with the right choice in music and the right vocal performance, they can hit so much harder and even surpass the manga. It's quite funny because in the past, Oda has commented on just how unfair the anime is because they get to use music and how much that's able to enhance his scenes. This actually kind of reminds me of the pudding scene from Whole Cake Island, the one where she's taking Sanji's memories, because I have a lot of problems with the Whole Cake Island era of the anime, but to their credit, the way they adapted that, particularly with the musical choice, was magnificent. So I really do dread seeing this Kuma scene animated because it is going to destroy me all over again and probably worse. Also, one last beautifully subtle thing, and this was pointed out to me by Fool-ish in the comments, it's Fool_ish, but during Kuma's running, there's a lovely moment where he thinks of Ginny and stumbles, but then he thinks of Bonney and picks himself back up, running taller and prouder than ever. Just curious, where would you rank the Kuma flashback? Right now, all the way at the top. Whatever the top rank is, invent a new rank and put the Kuma flashback there. However, there's also quite a bit of recency bias going into that assessment. My honest feeling right now is that it is the best flashback in all of One Piece, but I would like to sit with it for a bit and maybe revisit some of the other candidates as well. It's definitely first, second, or third though. I very much struggle to think of other flashbacks on this level, let alone superior to it, because 26 years into this story, I feel like the writing only continues to get stronger and stronger. You think Bonney crying after the Paramount War is her seeing her father for the first time again? That's a good point actually, and I think it has to be. The panel we're referring to is this one. It's a tiny sliver and very, very easy to miss on a first read-through, but here's Bonney watching the Paramount War being broadcast and crying for what were then unknown reasons. And now we know that Bonney didn't see Kuma again after his goodbye at the Sorbet Kingdom. Bonney chased after him relentlessly, but she never saw him. So the first time she sees her father is on snail television as a mindless weapon. And that right there is probably the end of Bonney's fun adventure as a pirate. From here on out, we only really see her all serious and angsty. In fact, in chapter 581, we see her saying, "This is all his fault. We need to go to the New World and find him right now," which we now know is referring to Vegapunk. So Bonney and her crew were on their way to Egghead Island when they were intercepted by the Blackbeard Pirates. My question is, did Bonney not hear about Kuma spending 2 whole years in one place defending the Sunny? She seemed to be hot on his heels up until that point. So I have a bigger question about this, but let's address Bonney first. The big difference between pre and post time skip Bonney is that she lost her crew. Bonney wasn't able to move anywhere near as freely as she once did, and it became a lot more difficult for Bonney to get anywhere. Instead of setting sail with reckless abandon, it was a long, patient process of stowing away as an assortment of old and young ladies and gradually getting closer and closer to her destination. But even with that sort of slow travel, Bonney could have gotten there, because Kuma was doing nothing but sitting there for 2 whole years, so yes, I take that point. The thing that interests me more is that in chapter 603, Frankie confirmed that the Marines knew about Sunny's location, and when they found out there was a quote, big battle, but the Marines were unable to overcome Kuma. So the world government did know where Kuma was, which makes me ask the question of why did they allow their super weapon to go rogue for 2 whole years without doing anything? Surely this, of all times, would have been the time to initiate the self-destruct sequence that Saturn wanted installed. And I know at this point they had a whole army of Kuma, so the loss of the original is not necessarily a big deal, but that's all the more reason to destroy the original Kuma and remove any potential threat he poses to the future. Like say, I don't know what he's doing right now. Here's the thing though, that is the logical response. And I think that what may have been going on there is actually a bit more on the sinister side. After Kuma's mission was complete, as we know, he became a rental slave for the world nobles, and what I'm imagining is Saint Saturn very specifically ordering the Marines not to destroy Kuma. Because he's strong in everything, but send a couple of admirals down, it shouldn't be a big issue. But I think that the world government wanted to keep Kuma as a trophy, the body of the last defiant buccaneer, cursed to forever serve the world government, and his value as a symbol outweighed his potential future threat. There is actually one plot hole in this chapter. When Kuma saw Bonney eating, why did he not grab her and run away? So I think the term plot hole is a very strong and very overused term. It's definitely not a plot hole. It is a question you could ask. And I guess you could make the argument that, yeah, it's an opportunity to be with his daughter, just grab Bonney and just pop away. She was cured, so I guess they could just keep teleporting away indefinitely. But doing so is also incredibly risky. Because as a pirate, yes, Bonney had already taken a stand against the world government and is liable to be punished under their system, but the difference is that she wouldn't be vindictively punished. Whereas if Kuma goes back on his deal, then Saturn is going to go out of his way to make sure that Bonney is enslaved and suffers in even more excruciating ways than Kuma did. But as a pirate, the worst that's going to happen is that she gets imprisoned, maybe executed, but even then, execution is a better outcome than whatever the world nobles would have done to her if Kuma broke his part of the agreement. There's also something that I didn't notice at first about this scene, a great full circle moment, because Bonney eating in the restaurant is the first time that we, the reader, see her, but as it turns out, this introduction is the last time that Kuma sees her. So it's both an introduction and a farewell, and it's criminal just how perfectly all of this came together. Another fun little detail is that the customers that notice Kuma's massive head staring inside are the same ones that you can see if you go back to Bonney's introduction in chapter 498, where both of them are sitting there staring at Bonney in disbelief at how much she is eating. I'm excited for Bonney to get to hear the actual drums of liberation next chapter. You'll definitely be hearing them pretty soon. But just on the next chapter, this is the time of year where One Piece gets a little bit confusing. So what happens is Weekly Shonen Jump takes a 2-week break for Christmas and New Year. However, that doesn't affect the scanlations that show up online. The reason for that is that before the break, all of the magazines are printed and distributed so that they're ready to be sold immediately after the break. But that means that because the chapters physically exist, the pages are taken, scanned, translated, and put up online. Which is what happens anyway, but in this particular case at this time of year, it happens very, very early. Basically, what it means is that if you're an official only reader, then One Piece is now on break for 2 weeks. The next chapter, chapter 1103, will be live around the 7th to 8th of January. Meanwhile, if you're a scan reader, then there will be a new chapter next week, right before New Year, and then that will be followed by a 2-week break for you, with chapter 1104 making its way onto the internet around January 16th. Either way, both sides get a 2-week break. It's a staggered break. The official go on break first, and then the scan readers follow. It's a weird time of year. But no matter what, I think we can all agree that 2023 has been a spectacular year for One Piece, and I cannot wait to see what 2024 brings us.